I still remember the soft clink of wine glasses and the scent of vanilla-scented candles that filled the upscale restaurant. Friends, family, and a few business associates had gathered at Sterling's invitation. It was supposed to be a rehearsal dinner to celebrate our upcoming wedding. The night was tinged with excitement and toasted with champagne. I was wearing a delicate white cocktail dress, chosen specifically for the occasion, a miniature nod to the wedding gown I would have donned in a matter of days. Then, everything changed. Sterling rose from his seat, a swagger in his stride as though he were a grand performer about to deliver a show-stopping number. I expected him to tap his champagne flute and share some sweet anecdote about how we fell in love, or perhaps reassure everyone that all the last-minute wedding details had come together. Instead, he cleared his throat, pulled the microphone from the DJ's stand, and smirked. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement to make." He paused for dramatic effect, scanning the crowd of bewildered faces. "I'm afraid the wedding is off." Silence fell like a guillotine blade. My mind buzzed with 1,000 questions, but I said nothing. I'd prepared for this moment, not the specifics, of course, but I'd harbored a nagging suspicion that something was off. Sterling had been distant for weeks, locking his phone with new passcodes, stepping outside to take calls, turning away from me when texting at night. With the hush of stunned onlookers in the background, he continued. "Listen, folks, I know this is unexpected, but let's just say she's not really wife material." He spoke those last words with such glib finality that a ripple of surprise shot through the room. A few people gasped, some coughed uncomfortably, and others sat there, jaws dropping. My face heated, but I forced myself to remain poised. If his goal was to humiliate me, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of an outburst. He set the microphone down on a table with a flourish, as though expecting applause. No one moved, no one clapped. Embarrassment, horror, or quiet sympathy churned across the guests' faces. Inside me, a tempest raged, but outwardly, I lifted my chin. When my tears gathered, because how could they not, I blinked them away quickly. I saw the faint glimmer of delight in Sterling's eyes. He had engineered this public spectacle to shame me, painting me as unworthy of marriage. He had no idea I was ready for him. It was only 2 weeks before that I discovered the first concrete sign of Sterling's betrayal. I'd come across an email on his tablet, left carelessly open on the couch. Normally, I'd never pry, but the subject line couldn't be ignored. About the private investment. Urgent. When I read through the message, I realized he was funneling money out of our shared savings account, money we'd earmarked for a down payment on our future home, and placing it into a private fund with questionable legitimacy. Worse yet, he was transferring it in his name alone. He was prepping to vanish with our combined assets, leaving me to face any debt or shortfall. The sinking feeling in my gut told me the situation was dire, but instead of confronting him right away, I decided to do some digging. When he was off at his supposed meetings, I tracked down receipts, emails, and phone records he carelessly left around. It helped that I'd studied business and had a knack for reading financial statements. The more I learned, the more certain I became. Sterling was up to his neck in shady deals, and there was a very real possibility he was planning to dump me once he drained our accounts. By the time he texted me 3 days later, casually mentioning that he might need more personal space, that the wedding might be too big a step, I already had an attorney on standby. That's the type of person I am. Methodical, calm, and very deliberate. I told him sweetly, "Don't worry if you're stressed about the wedding. I understand it can be overwhelming. Let's just focus on what makes us happy." He had no clue I'd begun creating a separate account in my name, quietly moving my share of the money out of our joint account. I left enough in there to keep him unsuspecting, but no more than I was willing to lose. For the next 2 weeks, I kept my mask firmly in place. I smoothed out wedding details as if everything was normal, juggling calls with caterers and emailing the florist. My best friend, Karina, was the only person who knew the truth. She backed me up every step of the way, providing moral support and a shoulder to lean on whenever my composure threatened to crack. The day before the rehearsal dinner, my attorney, Ms. Yang, confirmed that all the documents were filed, revocation of financial consent, ensuring that Sterling could not borrow or withdraw funds in my name. A list of evidence. Photocopies of suspicious wire transfers, suspicious texts, and the private fund details. Personal protection. A discreet letter from Sterling's ex-lover, someone he had been seeing before we met, apparently, who was eager to warn me that he was a serial financial exploiter. When I read that phrase, serial financial exploiter, I had no doubts left about my course of action. Sterling would discover just how prepared I was to handle betrayal. And now, on that fateful night at the restaurant, I watched as my supposed fiancé made a grand gesture of calling off our wedding, insulting me while believing he was walking away triumphantly. His gall was astounding. He'd invited all those people not to celebrate, but to witness my public humiliation. Maybe he thought I'd melt into a puddle of tears and vanish into the bathroom. Perhaps he believed I'd beg him to reconsider. Oh, how wrong he was. My heart hammered in my chest, but as I rose from my chair, I channeled every ounce of self-control. I walked with measured steps, ignoring the hush that fell over the crowd. He was waiting for me to sob, to fling accusations at him in an unhinged rage, or to collapse in heartbreak. Instead, I drew a breath and reached into my purse. "I have something to show you," I said quietly, but my voice carried in the silence. Sterling looked mildly amused, his eyes skimming over my trembling lashes. I wasn't trembling from fear, though. I was trembling with the final surge of adrenaline that came with a well-orchestrated plan. I pulled out a photograph, the single piece of evidence guaranteed to rattle him in front of all these people. It was a picture of him sitting cozily in a cafe with a woman who was distinctly not me, a woman he'd once described as an old acquaintance. They were leaning in, heads together, but that wasn't the scandalous part. On the table was a printout of his transfer to that private fund. The date, the amounts, the signature line where he'd forged mine. It was all captured in perfect focus. The gasps around us were audible. Sterling's jaw went slack. He almost literally dropped the microphone, still clutched in his sweaty palm, on the wooden floor, making a jarring crack that echoed in the silent room. I slid the photo across the table, letting it rest in front of him. Care to explain that? I asked, my voice just loud enough for the audience to hear. He stammered, turning pale. That's not... This is out of context. I let out a half laugh, scanning the perplexed stares of our stunned guests. You want to tell them how you transferred our money to an offshore account for your own personal investments? Or should I? A hushed wave rippled through the restaurant. I could see my parents gaping in shock, and I felt a pang of guilt. But better they learn now than after I'd been robbed blind. Sterling tried to regain composure, but it was too late. The cat was out of the bag. The fiancé who had just boasted that I wasn't wife material now stood revealed as a cunning manipulator who had planned to walk away with stolen money. The hush broke into a flurry of whispering, unsettled chatter. Sterling's face was turning a fascinating shade of red. His hands shook so violently he had to set the microphone on the table. I'd done more than just gather photos, of course. I had a file ready to drop into the laps of the authorities at a moment's notice. I had bank statements that documented how he changed account permissions without my knowledge. As soon as my attorney gave me the go-ahead, everything would be processed. But I wasn't planning on having him arrested tonight, not at the rehearsal dinner. I merely wanted the truth out there. I wanted him to witness how quickly a false veneer of success could shatter. Most of all, I wanted to walk away from this man with a clear conscience, knowing I'd protected myself and made sure he wouldn't find it so easy to con the next unsuspecting victim. Sterling's arrogance had convinced him I was clueless, spineless, someone who needed him more than he needed me. He thought I'd be too busy picking wedding flowers to notice the suspicious bank notifications, or that I'd be too smitten to investigate his constant business trips. He was wrong. And in that moment, under the dim restaurant lights, he realized how badly he had underestimated me. The days after that dramatic cancellation were predictably chaotic. Sterling tried to control the narrative, feeding tabloids or gossip channels with claims that I was a gold digger. It was laughably ironic. He was the one siphoning money from our accounts, but he painted me as the unscrupulous party. Unfortunately for him, I had a head start. Through Ms. Yang, I'd supplied everything to the authorities. A chronological account of suspicious transactions, including screenshots of texts where Sterling explicitly instructed someone to just forge her signature if needed. By the time his accusations reached the public, the bank had already frozen the stolen funds. Sterling found himself entangled in legal nightmares. His unscrupulous business partners promptly turned on him to avoid indictment, leaving him with no safety net. Even some of his closest allies in the corporate world distanced themselves, worried they'd get dragged down with him. Back at the restaurant scene, the entire fiasco became local legend. A canceled wedding turned exposé, complete with photographic evidence. Some guests had recorded bits of the confrontation on their phones. Clips of Sterling's humiliating meltdown surfaced on social media. In one short video, he could be seen floundering and banging on the table as I calmly slid the photo forward. The internet loves that sort of dramatic irony. The clip went viral. Sterling's own words haunted him. She's not wife material. The comment, once intended to degrade me, became the punchline of jokes at his expense. People would retweet the phrase with a snippet of him stammering, "This isn't what it looks like." In a matter of days, he'd lost what he prized most, his reputation as a suave businessman and an influential figure in high society. I should have crumbled under the weight of the betrayal, the canceled wedding, and the heartbreak. But I didn't. As it turns out, heartbreak can be a powerful motivator, especially when you've anticipated its arrival. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my own business venture. I'd always wanted to open a boutique marketing firm for small artisans and creative entrepreneurs who lacked the resources of big corporations. For years, I had put that dream on hold, partially because Sterling insisted it was too risky. He saw me as a potential liability, or maybe he just wanted me to remain dependent. So, I channeled my anger and sorrow into building something for myself. I took the money I'd salvaged, invested in my own business plan, and started from the ground up. Karina joined me, bringing her background in public relations. At first, it was a small operation, set up in my dining room. We took on local clients, making promotional materials, launching social media campaigns, and setting up pop-up events. We offered a personal approach that big agencies seldom bothered with. I signed on my first major client, a talented pastry chef who specialized in ridiculously intricate cake designs, the kind that look more like sculptures than desserts. She'd been overshadowed by bigger, well-funded shops. Working with her taught me so much about perseverance, creativity, and the hunger for success. Within 6 months, we transformed her tiny operation into a local sensation. Word of mouth spread, my portfolio grew, and the revenue soared. Through all of this, Ms. Yang made sure I stayed informed about Sterling's legal entanglements. He was forced to settle with me out of court for the money he had attempted to steal, plus damages. His once pristine credit rating was in tatters, and his business allies had evaporated. I suppose I could have reveled in his downfall, but truthfully, I was too busy forging my own path to dwell on it. Life had taught me a harsh lesson. Real success is not about revenge, but about demonstrating that you can flourish after the worst of betrayals, and I was flourishing. Months later, on an unseasonably warm spring evening, I found myself strolling through a new commercial district I had helped design a marketing campaign for. Small coffee shops, artisan jewelry stores, and niche boutiques lined the street under twinkling fairy lights. I took a deep breath, watching people amble by with shopping bags, sipping lattes, and sharing laughter. This was my vision. A corner of the city where local creators thrived, each with a unique brand identity that my little firm had helped them cultivate. No longer was I overshadowed by a fiancé's demands or manipulation. I'd stepped into my own future. That's when I saw him. Sterling stood by a bookstore, alone, holding a stack of flyers. He appeared older than his years, as if stress had carved lines into his once smug face. The impeccably tailored suits and glossy shoes were gone. He wore off-the-rack pants and a wrinkled shirt. At first, he didn't notice me. He was too busy scanning the bustling street, perhaps hoping to see an old friend, anyone who might still give him the time of day. When his gaze landed on me, he froze. A flash of emotion crossed his eyes, perhaps remorse, perhaps shame. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, with visible reluctance, he forced a weak smile. "Hi. I heard you're doing well." It was a painfully awkward attempt at conversation, but I felt neither pity nor glee. Instead, there was a strange calm in my heart. "I am. How have you been?" I asked politely. He shrugged, gaze drifting to the stack of flyers in his arms. "Trying to get back on my feet. I've got an interview with a small firm. Nothing big." I nodded, offering a simple, "Good luck." A flutter of memory rushed through me. That night at the restaurant, his smug grin, his cutting words. "She's not wife material." If he'd learned one thing, it was that appearances can be deceiving, and underestimating someone can be the biggest mistake of all. He watched me for a moment, as if expecting me to twist the knife, to rub my success in his face, but I remained poised, just as I had that night. I had no desire to crush him further. His downfall had happened naturally when his own schemes fell apart. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a business card from my firm. "In case you ever need marketing services," I said softly, though we both knew that was more courtesy than genuine invitation. His eyes flicked across the card, and I saw a flash of shame in his gaze. He swallowed hard and slipped it into his pocket. "Thank you," he managed. With that, I offered a parting nod. I strolled away past the bright windows and cheerful chatter, stepping into a future that was purely, unquestionably mine. I never looked back. By the time I returned to my loft apartment that night, I was greeted by the gentle hum of my cat purring by the door. The city light shimmered through floor-to-ceiling windows, a testament to my fresh start. I sat at my desk, running a hand over my latest stack of design drafts for a client's upcoming grand opening. My phone buzzed. Another potential partner wanting to schedule a meeting, and even as I listened to the message, I couldn't help recalling the day Sterling first tried to bring me down, and how he had laughed as he declared me not wife material. Well, he wasn't entirely wrong. I wasn't wife material for him, but I was, in fact, something far better. Resilient, savvy, and free. The irony was as sweet as any wedding cake that might have been served at our doomed reception. In that moment, as the city glowed behind me, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. I had walked through fire, and I'd come out stronger, unburnt by the flames of betrayal. Sterling, on the other hand, had learned that you can't break someone who quietly sees through your schemes and plans accordingly. His biggest mistake was forgetting that the sharpest minds rarely make a scene. They simply wait for the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth. And so I rose, stepping firmly into the life I'd chosen, one built on my own successes, my own terms. No public meltdown, no insults, no desperate pleas could ever again undermine my confidence. I had faced betrayal, devised my strategy, and in the end, emerged triumphant. I was nobody's wife material. I was my own person, powerful, audacious, and utterly unconquerable.